In this video, I'm going to share with you a little bit about timing belts, timing belt parts, how to identify worn parts, the pros and cons of not replacing all of the timing belt parts when it's time to do your timing belt. See, when they started making these vehicles that had timing belts instead of timing chains and putting a change interval on them, a lot of people was only replacing the belt unless they knew they had some other issue. Well, as time went on, people started replacing the belt every scheduled time change, and then replacing the associated parts every other associated time change, scheduled time change, like the water pump, the tensioner, the idler rollers, the tensioner rollers, and stuff like that. Well, you know, I know some of you find yourself in a circumstance where you can't afford $300-400 worth of parts to replace your timing belt stuff, and I don't want you to take the chance of breaking the timing belt, seizing a roller, throwing the timing belt because you don't have enough money to replace all of the parts. So this is what I have done in the past, and this may help you make a good decision. Well, some of you know that I recently was on a road trip and had a water pump begin to leak severely. The pump was loose, the timing belt was hanging off of it. Had I continued to try to make it somewhere where I felt comfortable dealing with that, the water pump could have came apart, through the timing belt, destroyed the motor. Nobody wants that. Now, I did replace the timing belt on this car about 50,000 miles ago. I did not have documented history of it and probably should have replaced all the parts. At the time, I could not afford it. So what I did was inspected the parts, knowing and understanding that if another part went bad, I would probably get a warning from the car and I could deal with it later. So that's what happened. Anyway, now the next couple of clips you'll see will show you some good parts and some worn parts, mostly the worn. But back when they started doing these timing belts, like I said, people would replace associated parts every other time. What I normally do is replace any part that I can identify that's worn. I replace everything every other change except for the hydraulic tensioner and the water pump. If the water pump is not 10 years old, I normally don't change it. So what I try to do when I have a scheduled timing belt change is have all parts on deck. The rollers, the tensioner, the water pump, everything. Then I inspect everything, and what is worn, I replace. What's not worn, I keep that part until the next change. Now on water pumps, I normally change them if they're 10 years old or leaking. If they're not 10 years old, not leaking, I don't normally change them. This is the timing belt. It's in pretty good shape. Really don't have no cracks on the back of it and no damage on the thread part of it. And it was right about 65,000 miles or something like that. But I went on ahead and replaced it because the water pump was bad, and since it was off, it wasn't going to last much longer. It's a bad serpentine belt. You can see all the cracks along it there, and then on the back side, it even got cracks along it. So I replaced that serpentine belt. Now that's a worn idler roller. That thing shouldn't spin around once. This is a slightly worn tensioner. As you can see, it takes very little effort to spin it with the tip of my finger. Should be tighter than that. It's a little noisy, but it's hard to film it with both hands. That's a leaky water pump. As you can see, coolant was coming out of the weep hole and running down the pump, so I replaced it. Okay, if you're doing a timing belt job and you can spin your water pump like this, that thing spins around at least a turn or two when I spin it. That's worn and need to be replaced, so don't skip replacing the water pump that's that loose. Now this water pump here, it only turns like a half a turn, so it may be good, and it's a HEPU, H-E-P-U. So it may be good another cycle. Alright, this is the pump that was on my car that was leaking. As you can see, it has some play in it. You can even hear it. and when I spin it, you can hear that thing clunking around in there. So they normally leak before they actually fail, and this is a Volvo Aisin water pump. Okay, stop. Alright, this is a pump I pulled off of a car when I changed the water pump. As you can see, that white dot, when I try to spin it, it only spins around less than one full turn, and if I spin it just like that, it doesn't spin around at all as soon as I let it go at the top. So this pump is still nice and tight. Should have been good for another cycle, and almost has zero play in it. I can feel it just barely wiggle, but I really can't wiggle it if it was on the car. So I could have left this one on there for another cycle. Now, not too long ago, I had a Volvo 960 that had a timing belt change at 58,000 miles just because it was over 11 years old. Hadn't reached its 70,000 miles yet. Well, about 25,000 miles later, I started getting noise from an idler roller. It was trying to seize up, throw the belt, and at that time I had replaced the belt only at 58,000. Well, at about 85, 86,000, I replaced the belt, the idler roller, and the water pump. Everything else appeared to be serviceable. Because the water pump was leaking and it was over 10 years old, I replaced it. So, if you can afford it, always replace all the parts, especially if you don't have a history of it. If you can't afford it, inspect your parts, replace the ones that's worn, and if you got any questions, go ahead and post them. If you feel that this information was beneficial, please like it and share it with your social media friends. You can also subscribe to my channel so that you can get notification of future videos that I post. Visit my channel. I have all types of do-it-yourself videos there. You can leave questions here, and I'll try to respond to them as quick as possible. You can also visit my website at robertspinner.com. Thanks again for watching.